Okay guys, welcome back to another episode of Rotten Reviews. On this episode I take a look at the 2008 film The X-Files I Want to Believe. It has a 31% on the tomato meter and a 32% on the audience score. Certainly rotten. I think these scores, critics and audience, are fair. They are believable. I agree with both of them. The audience score has 253,000 plus participants there. Yeah, you can pretty much assume this thing is rotten by any standard. Now, as an X-Files fan, I have to say that I didn't really appreciate the first X-Files movie from 1998. It, to me, was just a long, stretched-out episode of the original X-Files series. Nothing impressive, didn't help the series or hurt it. It was just kind of a theater experience time waster along the lines of the X-Files. This one, however, this one felt like, the director of the X-Files actually misleading and taking a dump on his own fans for whatever reason. The theatrical trailer for this movie promised something that almost looked like an X-Files version of The Thing. It teased some kind of alien buried in the ice. The imagery was clearly meant to, convince, confuse, or mislead the viewer into thinking that it had something along the lines of The Thing. It's set in a frozen environment. But no, this movie is actually more like just a boring, quite pointless psychological thriller that doesn't really thrill, with the X-Files characters, or at least 3 of them, slapped into it, and with the title, the X-Files, put onto the front of it. It is very much an insult to fans of the X-Files, and I was a fan of the original X-Files series. I think I lost interest only at the point at which the main characters were replaced with Monica Reyes and John Doggett. Most notably the character who played, or the actor that played the T-1000 from Terminator 2. He became, the replacement for Mulder. And I'm sorry, I believe his name is Robert Patrick. I like the guy, but he didn't work as a replacement for Mulder, and almost everybody I knew that was a fan of the X-Files back in that day, they kind of lost interest in the program. And I remember having the X-Files set to record on my DVR, and yeah, I remember it recording the entire final stretch of episodes, and I never actually watched them. And it wasn't until years later that I saw the final episode of the original X-Files show, and it kind of ended with Mulder reappearing to just discover that he knew the date that the aliens were going to invade, or they were going to colonize on that date. And that was just the big ending to the show, and it felt very pointless, and I had long since lost interest in it. Now, from what I understand, the reason that the show petered out so badly was because the actors in the show were demanding such high salaries, and the producers of the show just didn't want to pay, and so that's what happened. It just ruined the show. Now, this X-Files movie, I want to believe, is set 6 years after the events of the original X-Files show ended, after that final episode. And it's just really bad. It was really boring. I saw this when it came out on DVD, and I didn't have much hope for it because I almost didn't know it existed, and that told me that, yeah, the word of mouth wasn't there, the marketing wasn't there. So I watched it with an open mind, and I almost couldn't get through it. Like a lot of people, they actually fell asleep during this movie. I almost did. I didn't quite fall asleep, but it was a struggle just to get to the end of it. And what was promised by the theatrical trailer as some sort of alien thing buried in the ice, no, it was just an ex-Catholic priest who was stripped of his priesthood because he was a pedophile. He had some kind of psychic or clairvoyant ability, and he was, helping the FBI find a serial killer. And it turns out that this serial killer was just somebody that was doing Frankenstein-type experiments. He was abducting people for the purpose of harvesting their body parts and then doing some kind of Frankenstein experimentation on them. And that was it. And most of this long, overly long movie, it gave you nothing paranormal, nothing supernatural, just a whole lot of talking and moving around from point A to B. Very forgettable and dull. And even as a standalone movie, If this had been a movie with nothing to do with the X-Files and had just been like a crime drama thriller, it would have also been bad and boring and you would have fallen asleep. So it's like this director meant to just insult the fans or insult somebody, because this isn't just a little 90-minute thing here. This thing's quite lengthy. Now, let's get right to the audience reviews on this. 1 hour and 44 minutes to be exact on the running time. Way too long for what's going on here. We have a review from October 25th, 2019. 2.5 stars. Not horrible, but not great either. It is just average, run-to-the-mill, okay episode, but longer and prettier. No way. If I had to give this a star review, I would say 1 star. No higher than 1 star, because, you know, a movie was made and there was some, you know, effort put into it. But there wasn't anything here. It certainly wasn't the X-Files. This would have failed as an episode of the X-Files because people would have fallen asleep. It would have been perhaps one of the worst episodes of all time. And because just for the sheer boredom. And the characters here, they like totally forget about everything that happened in the first one. Alien plot and all that, just out the window and not even mentioned here. Mulder is, you know, he's in exile, a fugitive, but when he's needed to be brought back into the investigation by Scully, she brings him back on board and he shaves his beard off, and then he forgets all about the alien stuff and, you know, the coming alien invasion, and we're supposed to care about this weird, you know, all shot around the area of Vancouver in the wintertime, serial killer plot that's very boring. It wouldn't even have worked as an X-Files episode. It's an insult to the memory of the X-Files, and it's just a taste of, you know, what was to come in the future after this movie, when Chris Carter actually produced another series of the X-Files set in the modern day. And that was hit and miss, and it disappointed people at the end. You know, this was his worst, though. If you want to know where Chris Carter was when he had his worst material, this was his worst, with the X-Files name on it. He should have been ashamed of himself. 1 star at the most. Half a star from July 13th, 2019. Miscasting of Billy Connolly unfortunately ruins a good story completely. The end credits give this film the half star. Yeah, I don't even remember what Billy Connolly is. This defrocked Catholic priest with some kind of clairvoyant sight. And you know what? He's like a kind of an interesting character, Billy Connolly. He shows up in all kinds of different B movies, and he kind of looks like somebody that should be taken more seriously, but all his movies are like B movies for the most part, and I don't know what to think about him. It's just that I don't think he was miscast in that, in this movie. I think this movie, it wouldn't have mattered who you cast in any of these roles. It was just flat out going to be the same amount of rottenness. What does a Catholic priest with some kind of sight powers have to do with anything else in the X-Files? Nothing, but that by itself could have worked as an X-Files episode. But this didn't do anything for a long stretch of time. This is 1 hour and 44 minutes of just people walking around in the snow and looking for things. And I'm sorry, but it doesn't work. It's completely rotten. 2 stars, November 30th, 2018. That's quite a time jump. We have a time jump of, you know, from July of 2019 all the way back to November of 2018. So obviously people have largely forgotten about this film. I don't think it's on Netflix or Amazon as a streaming choice. And, you know, it's probably a good thing, because this is just an embarrassment to everything known as the X-Files. 2 stars in any case. I suffered through this one more time, hoping I was in a funk the first time I wallowed through it many years ago, and it would magically get better. Discontinuity parade, lame, junior high level acting, writing and storyline produced in a blender set to chop. The only reason I finished it is because it was so bad it started coming back, and because a sort of good for its badness. You would think, as old as I am, I'd value my time more. Yeah, it's a time waster. Nothing happens here. It's a lot of words to say. It's just completely a time waster. There's nothing to be found here. X-Files fans or not, there's nothing to be found here. It's just boring. 4 stars, March of 2018. A very underappreciated film. I understand the disappointment after a 6-year absence. We wanted something extraordinary, and we got average. For me, however, average X-Files is pretty damn good. For those who claimed it was not really even an X-File, I have two things to say. One, you're right. Both both Mulder and Scully are no longer in the FBI, and the X-Files have been closed, so point taken. But two, as to it not being worthy to be called an X-File, I would remind people of episodes like Beyond the Sea. Okay, so they're saying there were other bad, not very well liked episodes of the X-Files. Yes, there certainly were. Even there were episodes in the first season that weren't very good. But that's not what the X-Files is remembered for. People can overlook an episode that doesn't work here and there. But this is supposed to be a movie that you're going to put your money down and you're going to see it in the theater. And it's got a running time of 1 hour and 44 minutes. So you're expecting something here. It's got Chris Carter's name on it. It was promoted by him. And he just like took a dump on the fans. That's what this is, straight up. And so that's why I say 1 star. 3.5 stars, not bad. The first one was better. No, don't compare this to the first one. First of all, the first one was just an elongated episode. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't anything that you couldn't have done in an X-Files episode of season 4 or 5. That's what it was, basically. But this one is straight up just insulting the fans and the memory of the X-Files. It's just like taking 2-3 of the actors from the X-Files show and putting them in something else and calling it the X-Files. Just a complete waste of time and an insult to fans. Chris Carter knew he was insulting the fans. He knew. In fact, I've seen some behind the scenes on this film, and Chris Carter actually had people on the set wear kind of like werewolf-like costumes and props, and he put that on the set so that that would be seen and talked about by people during the production of the movie. And so he was deliberately trying to mislead the fans that this would be some kind of werewolf story, and the trailer misled you and thought it would be some kind of alien story. And what did you get? Some kind of forgettable, not X-Files, serial killer, body part, organ harvesting type story that went on for way too long. It was totally boring. He deliberately dumped on the fans, and he did it all throughout the production of the movie. He planned to mislead them, and he did a good job. And I'm glad I didn't even know the movie was out there. I'm glad the marketing missed me, and I'm glad that I just saw this. I just saw this on home video. And I'm glad that's how I saw it, because I would have been very angry if I had gone into the theater as an X-Files fan and paid money and got this. Ooh, I would have been mad. But let's move on. December 30th, 2017, another big time jump in the reviews. 1.5 stars. First of all, this is a pretty terrible movie. Second, it is barely an X-File. Not sure Mulder would have left the basement for this case back in the day, let alone come out of hiding. An awful return for the once mighty show. Anderson is given a back seat once again, proves she has surpassed Duchovny and this show. Yeah, they bring up an interesting point. This doesn't even have logic to it in regards to the X-Files. Mulder is in hiding. He's a fugitive. Would he come out of hiding just for this forgettable nonsense serial killer case? Doesn't make any sense. And why would the FBI bother to track him down through back channels? This is just a serial killer case, and there's nothing interesting about it. There's no reason why regular FBI agents can't be working this. It doesn't make any sense. It's just a lame excuse to dump on the fans. It's just an insult to the fans and to the memory of the X-Files. 2.5 stars, February 7th, 2017. Another big time jump. Not English, so I can't comment on that one. September 16th, 2016. Another big jump back in time. We're 2 or 3 pages into the reviews, and we're already 3 years back in time. But anyway, 5 stars. The X-Files, I Want to Believe, starring David Duchovny, Gillian Anderson, Amanda Peet, Billy Connolly, and Alvin X-Bit, whatever. I don't understand why fans of the show don't like this movie, because I love it. Most fans of the show don't like this movie because it wasn't about aliens, and for them I have one question: who gives a crap? The show was never about aliens, it was about the paranormal in general. I'm glad I don't have to continue any further on this review. This reviewer is out to lunch. Not only was it not a show about aliens that was teased in the trailer, but there's nothing paranormal going on here. It's just a serial killer type story. And in fact, that Catholic priest character played by Billy Connolly, the movie actually tells you that it's ambiguous as to whether he even has any psychic powers. So there's nothing paranormal to see here. So there's nothing here that even works in the X-Files sense. And it's also got the number one sin that any TV show or movie can commit, which is that it's just boring, straight out boring. It's boring with just 3 actors put into it that were in the X-Files back in the day, and it's an insult to the X-Files. 1 star, July 21st, 2016. I now know what everyone wants to believe, that there will be a well-acted and well-directed movie that will actually get good reviews, but hey, they tried, and some say that's all that matters. No, they didn't try. Or more accurately, Chris Carter did not try. He only tried to deceive. He deceived. This was his middle finger to fans and whoever else he wanted to insult. That's what this was, straight up. There's no question about that, in my opinion. July 17th, 3.5 stars. This would have been better as an episode on the show. No, it would have failed as an episode. It would have been the most boring, and it would have just tarnished whatever season this had been put in. It would have made the highlight of that season for being just flat out boring and pointless. 2 stars, July 3rd, 2016. Aside from Duchovny and Anderson's prodigious chemistry, there's little to work with in I Want to Believe, a confusing and highly convoluted thriller within its themes, and ill-realized script, and might be proof that the franchise doesn't translate from its groundbreaking TV predecessor to the big screen as greatly as one would have thought. Yeah, I'll agree with that. It doesn't. X-Files didn't translate to the movie theater at all. Even the '98 movie, while it wasn't a failure and it wasn't offensively bad, it was no more than a stretched out episode, and even at that time in '98, I actually saw it in the theater as an X-Files fan, and I remember thinking, well, it was okay, but I don't know why I had to see it in the theater. And so from that point on, I kind of knew the X-Files wouldn't translate to the theater, and it never did. And I think Chris Carter knew very well it wouldn't, and this was a deliberate insult to the memory of the X-Files. For some reason, he was mad. I don't know. I don't know what the story is there. That's just the feeling I have of it. Now, as far as, chemistry between the 2 actors in this film, those 2 actors, Duchovny and Anderson, they aren't actually together at the same point in place in the movie for very much. They're certainly both in the movie, but they're often apart from each other during this 1 hour and 44-minute runtime. So that's also inaccurate. There's very little of them actually interacting directly with one another, so that's a fail too. No chemistry to be found. The director wasn't even trying. He didn't put them together to try to get chemistry for more than just a few minutes. April 24th, 2016, 3.5 stars. I thought this movie was better than the first one. It seemed to flow better given its setting after the TV series had ended, though there were still things that were simply inserted in the movie without explanation. Still, all in all, not bad. It's like you're watching a different movie. I'm sorry, the first one was loads better than this. It actually functioned as an X-Files story. This one doesn't even function as an X-Files story. It's an insult, so I'm moving on. 1.5 stars, April 4th, 2016. It's like someone summarized the main 3 characters from the TV show, never mentioned what the X-Files were or anything about aliens or conspiracy, and they wrote the plot without any broader understanding of the context. If it had been a standalone movie, it would still be pretty terrible, but it certainly did nothing to resolve the ridiculous season 9 plot or shit-tastic series finale. Yeah, it's completely disconnected from the X-Files. If you watched this movie and you didn't know anything about the X-Files, you weren't a fan, you were too young, or for whatever reason you didn't know anything about X-Files, and you watched this particular movie as your introduction to the X-Files, you'd be totally confused. You would be wondering what the hell was the X-Files? Was it some long drawn out crime procedure drama that wasn't that great? Because yeah, there's nothing paranormal or anything here. It's completely ridiculous. You wouldn't know what you were watching, and it would be something that would convince you not to pursue the X-Files any further. And now I know the series The X-Files is streaming on Netflix, and it may be on Amazon and others. Yeah, don't let this movie dissuade you from watching it, because you'll find it actually enjoyable in some ways, even in 2019. But yeah, if this was your first taste of the X-Files, you're just going to turn away from it after that, because this is like the director doing his best to convince you not to watch any of his material. I don't know what he was thinking. It just comes across to me as he's insulting the whole legacy or memory of the X-Files. Now, as far as this being, something that would try to resolve Ridiculous Season 9, yeah, Season 9, it kind of gives you the doomsday date. That's how it ends, of when the aliens take over. It's very disappointing, in the context of what the series showed everybody. And, you knew it wasn't going to be resolved in a movie, because, the movie came out in 2008. I don't recall what the date was of the alien takeover. It was like 2012 or 2014 or something like that. But already after several years, we knew that there was going to be no attempt to resolve this. Everybody had just abandoned it. I don't know. Believe me, there's no way. Even if there were, now we're in 2019 on this Rotten Review. We have seen an X-Files, a newer X-Files series come out. I'm not going to speak too much on that, but I can say that no, they didn't resolve it there either. We're still nowhere near trying to tie up how the original series ended. No one's going to try, and it's obvious Chris Carter doesn't care. And if someone were to try, it would be a fan. But Chris Carter has no interest. He didn't try to do that in his newest effort, so that's never going to happen. 1.5 stars, February 2016. Wow, was this bad? Like, not even Creature of the Week filler episode bad? Yeah, a lot of people, there's two different types of X-Files fans out there of the original show. There are the ones that they really appreciated the episodic Monster of the Week type episode. And then there are other fans that appreciated the story arc about the aliens and Mulder's abducted sister and the cigarette smoking man. They wanted all that wrapped up, and there's some crossover between those type of fans, but there really is a big divide amongst those two type of fans of the original X-Files show. I found myself more a fan of the overarching alien plot and the missing sister story and the cigarette smoking man. I wanted to see that wrapped up more than I really cared for the Monster of the Week. In fact, I'd seen Monster of the Week episodes done in so many other types of TV shows over my lifespan that I didn't really find that the appeal of the X-Files, but a lot of people did. Well, neither type of those fans would find anything redeemable about this movie. It wouldn't have worked as a Monster of the Week episode. It wouldn't have worked as a wrap-up of the original show. It has nothing to do with either one of those. It's simply like a bad crime thriller that's been, shoehorned into an X-Files project. The director, Chris Carter, he clearly had no intention of giving anybody what they wanted. 2.5 stars, January 31st, 2016. Maybe a good plot for the TV series, but on the big screen, no, I disagree with that review, because you're actually describing the 1998 film. That would have been a good episode on the X-Files show, but it was stretched into a movie. This one's actually unworkable in every way. It's an insult to everything about the X-Files, so I say nope, and it's 1 star. 2.5 stars. This plot seems more suitable for a 40-minute Fox episode rather than a Hollywood big screen movie. Again, no, it doesn't work in either way. It's like you're talking about the first movie, and maybe some of these reviewers are confusing this film with the 1998 film. That could be. January of 2016, 3.5 big stars. Wow, this should be interesting. It doesn't quite live up to the cinematic height of Fight the Future, that's the 98 film, but it is nevertheless a solid thriller with a returning duo in top form and more amusingly in a different place in their lives. The plot is indeed more a footnote, however lacking a grander scale, which makes it more like a 108-minute long TV episode with a movie sheen over it. Wow, this guy's out to lunch. He's being completely, if it is a he, he's being completely too gracious with this. It's like he's watching something totally different, and he respects this in some way. This isn't worthy of the respect with the word X-Files on it, I'm sorry. January 23rd, 2016, 2.5 stars. I always loved the X-Files. Yeah, and what does that have to do with this? This has nothing to do with the X-Files. I want to believe the 2008 film. It shouldn't have the word X-Files on it. There's nothing here that's the X-Files. 3 stars, December 27th, 2015. We're back in time now. Feels like one of these easily forgettable X-Files episodes that added nothing to the main mythology of the series, but still serves as a reminder that the season you keep coming back to the series is because of Mulder and Scully and their relationship. Plus, any movie that casts Xzibit in a role is already behind the 8 ball, even if it's just a throwaway role. If you think just putting a one-hit wonder rapper, song producer into this thing is its worst problem, wow, I don't know where you're coming from, because this thing's not X-Files in any way. That's the main crime here, aside from the fact that it's just boring. 5 whole stars, October 10th, 2015. Finally, the X-Files movie we deserved. I'm going to take that as that's straight up sarcasm, obviously. 3 stars, August 13, 2015. It's a feature-length episode and not an especially great one at that. Oh, and it had a two-headed dog. I'll agree with one thing. The only thing in this movie that kind of resembles something you'd find in the X-Files is the two-headed dog. Nothing else. I'm sorry, nothing else. 4 stars, August 2015. I enjoyed it long ago in theater, maybe because I was a big X-Files TV series fan. If you enjoyed this, you were either in the wrong theater watching a different movie, or you were asleep, or you were high, because you were the only one, certainly, that I've ever heard of. And we have an X-Files emergency alert, it seems, an Amber Alert wants to intrude on my X-Files, but we'll get back to that later, but not in this video. 2 stars, June 11th, 2015. I guarantee you once the movie's over, you will have already forgotten most of it. There is such a disconnect between the core cast, the murderer, and the murderer's victims. It's like they're all in different films. There are no stakes. There's no real villain. Billy Connolly's character contains the heart of the film, which is why it's especially bizarre that in the denouement scene we're simply told Father Joseph died. Mulder and Scully's constant shifting from believer to skeptic and back again had already gotten old. Yeah, well, at least this reviewer is bringing up an actual critique of the X-Files type story that's in here, but I say it's not X-Files. Yeah, it's like the characters are in different films. I already mentioned that. There's no chemistry between Mulder and Scully because it's like they're mostly doing different things and concerned with different things and in different places while in the same movie. So it's completely disconnected. I'll agree with that. But 2 stars is too high. I say 1 star. Here's one from May 27, 2015. 3.5 stars. This movie was about as good as an average X-Files episode. The good news is that the X-Files was a great TV series and an average episode is still pretty damn good. The bad news is you expect something a little more out of a movie that it took us 6 years to get, and you're still giving this 3.5 stars. Wow, you're just a glutton for punishment. If Chris Carter just came up and kicked you in the nuts, you'd be praising him for his skill, I suppose, because that's what this was. So I'm going to move on. April 20th, 2015, 3 stars. So I'm becoming a pretty big fan of the X-Files TV show, and after watching the first movie, I was pretty excited about this one. Unfortunately, this movie should have never been made. It's good in spots, and I love the 2 lead characters, who doesn't? But by the end of the story, you really ask what the big deal was. Why did this movie take so long to be made, and yet the end product is something we could have seen on the TV show? It's nothing spectacular that just screamed, make me into a movie. Yeah, it's just 3 characters from the X-Files, Mulder, Scully, and Agent Skinner. And they are running around in what appears to be a Vancouver, around the Vancouver, BC area, in the snow in the wintertime. And it's a lot of that, and it's very boring. So if that's what you're looking for in an X-Files production, yeah, it's kind of weird that it took years to get that big production, isn't it? Couldn't just any old fan go to Vancouver and film something on a low budget and make it more X-Files than this? Yeah, they could. So anyway, let's move on. 1 star, January 18th, 2015, not English. 1.5 stars, November 29th, 2014. Not even Duchovny and Anderson's chemistry can save this movie from falling into a C-rated movies category. The storyline was dull, more for a random thriller than for an X-Files movie. The movie title was totally misleading, and Scully's character, well, let's just say she wasn't anything like in the show. I never thought I lived the day to see Dana Scully being written so miserably. Total fail. If they do a third movie, they better do it at least as good as the first movie. No, if they did it as good as the first movie, it would also be a fail. It needs to be a whole lot better than the first movie, too. No one's going to put up with it in 2019 or 20. Sorry, it isn't going to work today. Maybe in 98, it would have been, it was workable because you were between seasons of a very popular TV show, or not, and this is a very old show. So if you were to make a third movie, it better blow us away. It better be 3.5, 4 stars. It better have Academy Award winning performances. Otherwise, it's going to be worsely panned than this movie was, no matter what it's about. Even if it is X-Files, so also let's unpack a little bit of this. They're saying that Scully's character wasn't Scully. Well, Scully spent a lot of this movie just kind of obsessed with a boy, with a young child, that her mind wasn't even on the plot that we're supposed to be thinking about, the serial killer plot. She spent most of her time just wandering about the movie, caring about some boy character that had nothing to do with the main plot. Complete fail and disconnected from the Scully that you would think you would get in an X-Files episode. 2 stars, November 14th, 2014. The only thing worth watching in here are the small amounts between Duchovny and Anderson. The rest is ridiculous filler. Yeah, there's very small amounts. There's very, very, very small amounts of them together doing anything other than talking a little bit, so you're going to be sorely disappointed. September 13th, 2014, 1.5 stars. I'd watched this movie in the past and it up again yesterday, not remembering it from before. Now I was a huge fan of the original, but it's an embarrassment to the franchise. I got about 30 minutes into it and said to myself, what's the point of watching this again? X-Files is about a conspiracy, agreed, but the same conspiracy over and over again. Can these writers not think of something new? Aliens exist. We already know that. Next. It's like they're almost talking about the 98 film there. So I'm going to say maybe they're thinking about the 98 film and they're putting it on the wrong movie. So let's move on. September 3rd, 2014. Not what I'd expected, but still worth seeing. No, it's not. Again, are you watching the proper one? I think maybe you're watching the 98 film. August 9th, 2014, 2 stars. I was really disappointed in this. For a show that has been off the air for years, the sequel follow-up was painstakingly boring. I just expected more for the wait. The plot of the movie had felt recycled from various previous X-Files episodes. I think even if this movie would be reduced down to episode, it still would have been boring. Yeah, it would have failed as an episode. This would have been the worst episode of whatever season they put it in. No question. 1 star, 2 out of 10. Shit is so fucking boring. Shoot yourself. That's from July 21st, 2014. I largely agree with that, of course, in a metaphorical way. 2.5 stars, July 13th, 2014. This movie was somewhat boring, didn't catch my attention. Somewhat boring? It was whole lot more somewhat. It was a lot boring. 4.5 big stars from July 4th of 2014. Now maybe this is somebody that's drunk on 4th of July beer keg swilling. Yeah. I've always loved Scully and Mulder. I'm glad they were able to do this together. Yeah, this guy's drunk. July 4th is actually the date of the year that Americans consume the most amount of alcohol. That's actually July 4th. I can see how that affected this review. No question, so let's move on. 1 star, April 24th, 2014. I love the X-Files TV show. It's my second favorite TV show of all time. However, this movie is just dreadful. I didn't watch the show when it was originally on, but after watching the show and getting into it, I really hoped they would make movies wrapping up the mythology. Assuming stupidly, I know, that the point of beginning the story was to one day finish it. Then this movie came out, and I've never been so disappointed in my life with a film. It's like a bad episode of the show, the only one I didn't care for. Yeah, it's worse than any bad episode. I don't remember all the bad episodes, but this would have been one of the worst, just because of how boring it was. and how disconnected the characters were together. They weren't even working together most of the time. Now, as far as the biggest sin of all X-Files material out there, taking into account everything, not just this movie, is that we never did get an answer, an ending, a proper ending for the X-Files. We never did. Even the newest material from Chris Carter, half-ass enjoyable at a lot of points. The newest series set in the modern day. It doesn't end anything either. It gives us more of a cliffhanger ending than the original show did. No, we never got an ending, and I'm here to say I don't think we ever will get an ending. 4 stars, April 5th, 2014. Don't, basically. Why they gave it 4 stars, I don't know. 1 star, March 20th, 2014. Everyone involved with this stinker should be ashamed. If you're going to try and milk the last bit of cash out of a dead franchise, at least have the decency to give us the ending you were too lazy to think up 6 years ago. Exactly, but Chris Carter, in my opinion, he wasn't even trying to do that. He was trying to insult us. He was trying to mislead from the very beginning. You see this in the making of. You see this in evidence out there that shows you what went on even during the production of this. It was built to deceive. It was built as a middle finger to somebody, but it came off as a middle finger to us X-Files fans. In any case, March 13th, 2014, 2.5 stars. This X-Files movie plays out like a lost episode more than a continuation of the show's mythology. It plays out like an episode that was deliberately cut from production for good reasons. It's too boring. 2.5 stars. Yeah, a lost episode, and you're saying it's 2.5 stars? No, a lost episode is 1 star. That's why I give this 1 star. And here's a 1 star from March 1st of 2014. I'm a huge fan of the TV series, but this movie was terrible. It's not worth downloading, even for free. I'll agree, if you downloaded this with whatever software, BitTorrent, whatnot, you got it for free. Mostly, congratulations. Even if you got it at the library, you used their internet connection to get it for free, congratulations, it was free. But you just wasted a whole lot of time at the library or wherever you spent downloading this, because it's a waste of electricity. That's how bad this is. Nothing redeemable to be found here. 2.5 stars, February 23rd, 2014. Going into this again, I was never an X-Files fan, and I haven't watched any of the series, but going into this, I had a feeling this movie will suck, because I heard so many people dislike this movie, and on one side, they have the rights to do so. The story is about FBI agents Fox Mulder and Dana Scully, played by blah, blah, blah. Now they reunite to track down a killer who abducts women. Well, that's, you never get to the point of why this is 2.5 stars. I don't believe you. You couldn't do it in a big paragraph. Well, you failed. And this movie failed. It had like a 1 hour and 44-minute runtime to give us something redeemable, and it failed on every level. And in fact, my opinion is this movie's a deliberate sabotage of the X-Files franchise, a big middle finger from Chris Carter. Don't know why. Maybe someday he'll tell us in his memoirs why. But in any case, 32% audience score, just for sheer boredom. It could go down to 12%. I would find it fair, because boredom is worse than anything else. Yes, you can make something offensively bad to something that people previously enjoyed, but when you make something boring, it's a worse crime than any of that stuff. So for the boredom, I say, if this dropped to 12% on the audience score, it would be fair. This isn't worth watching. Don't waste your time. Don't waste your electricity. Don't even go get don't even steal the neighbor's Wi-Fi to download this thing. It's not worth all that. And I will see you again on the next episode of Rotten Reviews.